You ever have one of those mornings where you step outside, take a deep breath, and think everything is exactly how it should be, only to find out maybe nothing is? That was me last Tuesday, the sun just barely peeking over the trees at the edge of my property in this sleepy little suburban stretch that nobody really notices unless they're driving past, and I see it. Right there, smack in the middle of my backyard. A hole. No, an actual pond. I swear, it wasn't small. It was the kind of thing that looks like a contractor had shown up with blueprints and a full crew, which of course, they hadn't. Nobody asked. Nobody warned me. Nobody even left a note. Just a goddamn pond. And I stood there, coffee cup half in hand, staring, and for a solid 10 seconds I think I might have just yelled, probably something along the lines of what in the hell. So, let me back up a little. My name's Ryan Harper, and I've owned this plot for about 7 years now. It's nothing fancy, just a simple patch of land outside the city where I can get away from traffic, sirens, and that never-ending buzz of people rushing to nowhere. I've got a little garden, a few fruit trees, a shed I built myself, and plans, long-term plans, for maybe a small guest cabin someday. It's peaceful, quiet, mine. At least it was. Now, I knew my neighbors, the Thompsons. Friendly enough on the surface, always waving from their driveway, exchanging small talk about the weather or what the kids were up to. But we weren't close. We weren't sharing secret family recipes or borrowing sugar in the middle of the night. So when I saw them crouched over the edge of this newly dug pit, shovels in hand, little smiles like they were doing me a favor, I realized right away, friendly neighbor vibes had just gone out the window. I yelled over the fence, "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" And for a moment, there was this pause. Birds went quiet. The air felt heavier, like even the morning mist was holding its breath. Mrs. Thompson, she's the one who answered. She had this sweet, saccharine tone that made my blood boil a little because I could tell she knew exactly how ridiculous it sounded. "Oh, Ryan, we just thought this spot would be perfect for a little pond. You know, for the kids to play around. Maybe some ducks, it'll be cute." Cute. That's what she called it. And my immediate thought, obviously, before I even let myself think, was, cute for who? Certainly not me. I have plans. I don't want a pond. And I'm not exactly sure why this sudden invasion of my property had turned into such a surreal episode of polite neighborhood absurdity, but it was real. Very real. I walked over, hands in the air, trying to keep my voice calm, though I felt it slipping like a balloon letting out air. "You dug a pond on my land. Did you maybe check with me first?" Mr. Thompson, standing there with his sleeves rolled up and mud on his boots, just shrugged. "We thought it was part of the common area, thought we were helping improve the neighborhood." I blinked, trying to digest this. The common area. Right. According to their logic, apparently my backyard had become public property overnight. A communal water feature, maybe to improve the vibe for passing joggers or something. And that's when it hit me. I could try reasoning. I could try talking. I could try being the calm neighbor for 5 minutes. But this wasn't going to work. It's not like we were talking about a couple of flower beds. This was a pond. A big one. Dug deep. Uneven edges. Dirt piled all over my garden. And I have to admit, there was a part of me, I won't lie, that fantasized about what it would look like to just watch them realize their mistake, feel the full impact of standing on someone else's property without permission. But I also knew I needed a plan. Calm reasoning wasn't cutting it. I had to escalate. So I did what any slightly frustrated, very territorial suburban homeowner would do. I called in the big guns. Not the lawyers. Yet, not city officials. No, I made a few calls, got some estimates, and by Wednesday morning, a small army of machines and men showed up at my driveway. Excavators, dump trucks, a backhoe, and a guy named Carlos who I immediately liked because he laughed at my story before I even finished telling it. "Don't worry, Ryan," he said, wiping sweat off his brow. "We'll make it disappear like it never existed." And honestly, hearing him say that, I felt this little spark of giddy satisfaction, because sometimes revenge doesn't need to be cruel. It just needs to be efficient. Meanwhile, the Thompsons were pacing by their fence, clearly realizing that the game had changed. They waved, maybe to be polite, maybe to apologize, maybe to signal surrender, I wasn't sure. And I couldn't help but smirk a little as the machinery rolled up, the first sounds of engines rumbling like a warning bell. I could almost see Mrs. Thompson's smile falter, like she'd just realized maybe her idea of a cute little pond wasn't going to be the highlight of the neighborhood after all. But here's the thing. Even as I watched them, I couldn't ignore this creeping feeling in the pit of my stomach, the kind that tells you this isn't just about dirt and water. It's about respect, boundaries, and sometimes the quiet ways people try to take advantage of your kindness. And that's what made the whole morning tense, almost cinematic, the kind of tension you feel when everyone knows something's about to happen, but nobody's sure exactly what it will look like until it's in motion. And for me, that something was going to be my own, carefully orchestrated, silent little triumph over the absurdity that had appeared in my backyard. As Carlos and his crew started prepping, shovels hitting the dirt, engines rumbling, I wandered around my property, thinking about how quickly things can spiral, how neighbors can drift from polite strangers to people testing limits, and how sometimes the only way to reclaim your space, your plans, your peace, is to take action before the situation takes action on you. And I just knew, that by the end of the day, that pond wasn't going to exist anymore. And maybe, just maybe, the Thompsons would learn a lesson about boundaries, respect, and what it really means to live next to someone who isn't afraid to defend what's theirs. So by Wednesday morning, it was like my backyard had turned into some kind of construction site from a Hollywood movie, only way less glamorous and way more muddy. I'm standing at the edge of the pond, or what's left of the hole in the ground, watching Carlos and his crew unload the machines, and I swear, there's a little thrill that runs up your spine when you realize that you've got the upper hand for the first time in a week that has been nothing but weird. The Thompsons are still hovering by their fence, trying to act casual, but there's a nervous twitch in Mr. Thompson's shoulder, the kind you see when someone's pretending nothing bad is about to happen, but knows exactly how bad it's going to be. Carlos comes over, wiping his hands on his jeans, and says, "You ready, Ryan? I mean, we can start tearing this thing apart, but I've got to warn you. Once we get going, there's no going back." And I just grin, because yes, that's exactly what I'm ready for. Do it, I say. Make it like it never happened. And in that moment, I can't help but feel like some kind of suburban vigilante. It's ridiculous, I know, but it's satisfying in a very pure, simple way. So the machines roar to life. There's the backhoe, scooping dirt out of the hole like it's a sandbox gone rogue, dump trucks rumbling off with piles of soil, and the sound of metal scraping against earth that is somehow deeply satisfying. And all the while, the Thompsons are standing there, peering over the fence, their mouths slightly open, like they're witnessing a small apocalypse in their backyard. I catch Mrs. Thompson muttering, probably some frantic apology disguised as casual observation. "Oh my, we didn't think it would be this destructive," she says. I don't respond. I just sip my coffee, lean on the fence, and watch. There's a strange art to watching chaos unfold when you know you're in control of it. As the hours drag on, I wander closer, making small talk with Carlos about the machinery, asking questions about the soil, the grade, and occasionally tossing in comments to the Thompsons like, the ducks might have been happier elsewhere. Mrs. Thompson glares, her eyes narrowing in that way that tells you she's reconsidering every life choice that led her to this exact fence line at this exact moment. I can almost hear the mental dialogue running through her head. Maybe that pond wasn't such a good idea, and I don't even feel bad about it. Not really. There's this moment, though, about mid-afternoon, when the sun is high enough to bake the top of my head, but still gentle on the back of my neck. That makes me pause. I stand there, watching the machinery claw through the earth, and I feel this weird mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. I mean, I wanted my land back, yes, but I also realize how fast things can escalate, how quickly neighbors can go from polite smiles to unauthorized construction crews on your property. And part of me wonders if there's a better way to handle people like the Thompsons. Maybe a conversation, maybe an honest chat. But then I glance at the pond again, the massive hole in my garden, and I think, no, this is probably the only way they'll get it. At one point, Mr. Thompson decides he's going to intervene. He walks over with this hesitant step, hands held out like he's offering a truce. "Ryan, come on, we were just trying to make the backyard nicer for everyone. Maybe we can compromise?" I look at him, tilt my head, and say, "Compromise? You dug a pond on my land. How exactly do you propose we compromise? Maybe you fill it in halfway and call it even." He opens his mouth to respond, But the backhoe operator swings a huge scoop of mud and dirt from the edge right into the truck, and it lands with a thud that makes both of us jump. I can't help but smirk, and I swear I hear Mrs. Thompson mutter under her breath something like, "We might have underestimated him." The process of filling in the pond takes longer than I expected. Dirt has to be leveled, machines maneuvered carefully, and every so often Carlos asks me, "Do you want it perfectly flat, or do you want a little contour so it drains better?" And I say, "Perfectly flat. I don't want reminders of this ever again." And he laughs because he gets it. He's seen this kind of situation before, neighbors overstepping, owners taking decisive action, and he's apparently a fan of justice served via heavy machinery. By late afternoon, the pond is almost gone. The hole that seemed so permanent that morning is now nothing but a patch of freshly turned earth, leveled and smooth, like someone pressed the reset button on my property. And I can't even explain the relief. This feeling that's both physical and emotional. The Thompsons are still there, silent now, leaning against the fence, probably plotting their next move, or maybe just trying to figure out how they ended up losing to a backyard with machinery and a guy who won't back down. And yet, even in this victorious moment, there's introspection. I stand there, looking at the land, dirt still steaming from the sun, and think about what this all says about boundaries, respect, and communication. I mean, it's easy to chalk it up to a simple misunderstanding or a difference in perspective, but it's also a reminder that people will always test limits, sometimes politely, sometimes not, and that standing your ground isn't about being vindictive, it's about protecting what matters to you. I realize that in a way, this pond incident, ridiculous as it was, has made me more aware, more careful, and maybe even a little stronger, though I don't want to think I enjoyed the chaos too much. As the sun starts its slow descent, the Thompsons retreat to their side of the fence, muttering excuses, offering hesitant smiles, and I can't help but shake my head. Mr. Thompson waves, probably thinking he's still trying to make peace, and I give a small nod, half sarcastic, half genuine. It's a suburban truce, of sorts, fragile but existent. I turn back to the freshly flattened earth and feel this odd sense of pride mixed with a little humor. After all, not everyone can say they've outsourced revenge to a construction crew and lived to tell the tale without a lawsuit, though I admit, that thought flirts with the back of my mind for a second. That evening, I'm sitting on the porch with a cold drink, watching the last traces of dust settle, thinking about how surreal the week has been. Carlos and his crew are packing up, joking with each other about how this is probably the weirdest pond job ever, and I chuckle quietly to myself. I glance over at the Thompsons' house, the windows reflecting the amber light of sunset, and I realize that relationships, boundaries, and property, these things are complicated. Sometimes people mean well, but are completely misguided, and sometimes you have to be firm, unyielding, and maybe a little theatrical to protect your space. And in that quiet, I also feel a strange sense of closure, not just for the pond, but for the tension that's been building quietly over months, the subtle overstepping, the polite neighborly encroachments that everyone dismisses until they suddenly explode into something impossible to ignore. The pond was ridiculous, yes, but it revealed a lot about my neighbors, about myself, about how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine without becoming someone I don't want to be. I lean back, taking a deep breath, the kind that fills your lungs and almost shakes loose all the small annoyances of life. And I think about the strange mix of satisfaction and fatigue that comes from seeing chaos transformed back into order. There's humor in it, yes, the absurdity of waking up to a pond in your backyard. But there's also a lesson. Boundaries matter. Respect matters. And sometimes, the most effective way to teach a lesson is to let the earth itself do the talking. By the time night falls, the backyard is calm again. Lights from the city in the distance twinkle faintly, reminding me that life goes on outside this little battlefield. The Thompsons have retreated, the pond is gone, and my land feels like mine again, though I know, deep down, this isn't the end. People forget. They test limits. But for now, I've reclaimed my space, my garden, my peace. And honestly, that feels better than I expected. But there's also a lingering thought, a little whisper that reminds me, this isn't just about dirt, machinery, or pond removal. It's about the subtle tensions in our communities, the small power plays that happen between neighbors, and the way ordinary people navigate the line between friendliness and intrusion. And as much as I'd like to close the chapter neatly, I know the Thompsons are thinking about it too, probably debating if they'll ever try something like that again, or if maybe they've just learned a hard lesson about boundaries, pride, and the quiet fury of someone defending their own backyard. By Thursday morning, everything was quiet again. The pond that had invaded my backyard was gone, just dirt, leveled perfectly, looking like it had always been that way. I walked across the freshly flattened ground, boots sinking slightly in the softened earth, and there was this surreal satisfaction in the air, like the land itself was sighing in relief, finally back in order. Carlos and his crew were packing up, teasing each other about how this might be the weirdest backyard project of the year, and I had to laugh along. Not loud, just a quiet chuckle, the kind that comes when you realize you survived something ridiculous and came out unscathed, maybe even a little victorious. The Thompsons were still across the fence, peering over, trying to act casual again, though I could see the tension in their shoulders, the awkward half-smiles that said more than words ever could. Mrs. Thompson gave a tiny wave, the kind that's almost pleading for forgiveness, and I nodded slightly. Not mockingly, not triumphantly, just a simple acknowledgement that the day was done. It was enough. For now, I spent the rest of the morning surveying my garden, making small adjustments where the dirt had spilled into my flower beds, shaking my head at the irony that all of this chaos started over something so small in their minds, a cute pond, as they had called it. I couldn't decide if it was funny, frustrating, or both. I grabbed my coffee, leaned against the fence, and just let the quiet of my land settle in. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about reclaiming dirt. This was about reclaiming control, about standing firm when someone crosses the line, about realizing that being polite doesn't always mean being passive. Later that afternoon, I caught Mr. Thompson at the mailbox. I waved him over, partly out of curiosity, partly because I felt like there needed to be a conversation, no matter how awkward. He shuffled his feet, scratched the back of his neck, and muttered something about overstepping, about misunderstanding boundaries, about not realizing the line between helpful neighbor and invading my land was so thin. I listened, nodded, and for a moment, I thought maybe we could reset. Maybe this could be a learning moment. But even as I nodded, I felt a lingering awareness, the kind that doesn't let you forget that people will always test limits, and that sometimes lessons have to be learned the hard way. I could see it in the way he hesitated before saying anything else, the way Mrs. Thompson peeked from the window, half worried, half resentful. Boundaries, I realized, are delicate, and respect, once broken, isn't easily repaired with words alone. Actions speak louder, and the leveled dirt in my backyard was louder than any conversation we could have had. By evening, I sat on the porch, glass of iced tea in hand, watching the sunset light spill over the city skyline in the distance. The quiet hum of suburban life surrounded me, the occasional dog bark, distant traffic, and the faint chatter of neighbors settling into their routines. And in that moment, I thought about how strange life is, how quickly ordinary days can turn into absurd adventures, how quickly people can go from friendly waves to unauthorized pond construction, and how, sometimes, reclaiming your peace isn't about confrontation alone. It's about knowing your worth, understanding your boundaries, and being willing to defend them in whatever way makes sense. I couldn't resist checking the area one last time before dark, making sure the leveling was perfect, that the garden was safe, and that there were no surprises waiting to leap out of the ground. Everything was clean. Everything was as it should be. And yet, even in that satisfaction, there was a strange reflection. I realized that this story, ridiculous as it was, wasn't just about a pond, a neighbor, or even dirt. It was about community, about the unspoken agreements we make, about respect and civility, about the line between helpfulness and intrusion. And the lesson, for me, was clear. You can be kind, you can be generous, but you cannot allow anyone to rewrite the rules of your life without your consent. That night, I made a small ritual of it. I lit the fire pit, sat back, and let the glow warm my face as I thought about the chaos of the past few days. I imagined telling the story to friends later, laughing about the absurdity, maybe exaggerating the drama for effect. And yet, beneath the humor, there was a deep awareness. Small actions, even tiny decisions like digging a pond, can ripple out and create chaos, tension, and sometimes unexpected lessons. And sometimes, the way you handle it defines not just the property, but your character, your patience, your sense of justice. A week later, the Thompsons seemed to retreat. I caught glimpses of them in the garden from my porch, their movements careful, almost apologetic. And I felt a mix of relief and curiosity. Would they try again? Would they learn? Or would this become one of those suburban stories whispered among neighbors for years, exaggerated with each telling, teaching lessons about respect, boundaries, and how far one should go to defend their own backyard? I didn't know, and part of me hoped they did learn, not out of spite, but out of a better understanding of what it means to live near someone else. And that's when I realized something else. The story isn't just mine to tell. It's a shared reflection on how communities operate, how ordinary people navigate conflict, and how sometimes absurd situations force you to confront what matters most: your space, your plans, your peace of mind. The pond was gone, the land restored, but the lesson lingered. And the weird satisfaction of watching chaos turn back into order. That feeling stayed with me, subtle, quiet, a reminder that sometimes standing up for yourself can be both righteous and strangely fun. So, here's the truth. Not every neighbor drama ends with flattened dirt and a sense of victory. Sometimes it escalates, sometimes it fades away, sometimes it leaves scars. But in my little corner of suburbia, at least, I learned that boundaries are sacred, respect is essential, and occasionally, you have to let the earth itself speak louder than words. And if there's one thing I hope anyone hearing this story takes away, it's that being passive doesn't always lead to peace, and standing firm doesn't have to mean being cruel. It can mean being thoughtful, decisive, and yes, occasionally, a little dramatic. And I guess that's why I tell this story now. Because we all live in communities, we all deal with people testing limits, and we all face moments where absurdity collides with reality. So when someone tells you a pond is a good idea, you smile politely, but you also know how to defend your space. You know when to escalate, when to call in help, and when to let the quiet satisfaction of reclaimed order speak for itself. Now, I'm curious about you. What would you do if you woke up one morning to find a pond in your backyard? Would you laugh it off, try to talk it out, or take matters into your own hands? Do you think I overreacted, or was this a perfect example of defending your territory? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because honestly, I want to hear every perspective about boundaries, respect, community, and the strange ways neighbors sometimes test limits. And maybe, just maybe, someone reading this will think twice before digging in someone else's backyard. Because at the end of the day, the pond is gone, the land is mine again, and I've learned a lot about people, about myself, and about what it really takes to protect what matters. And that, more than anything, is a lesson worth sharing. So tell me, what would you do? And don't hold back.